how do you see yourself? How do you want to see yourself? And as we're talking about real estate, we're talking about investments, a lot of people wanting to go, like making the decision to go, well, I just want to feel successful. I want to feel accomplished. Is it possible to have it all? Or do I have to always sacrifice something? What defines you and who are you when everything else is stripped away?
This is your Real Estate Syndication Show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today, our guest is Christine Jewell. She's an author, speaker, coach, founder. She's helped successful leaders upgrade their lives by moving beyond the superficial life they've built. And so she has a focus on faith and high performance and relationship mastery. And she's a mother of six, a wife, and just a multiple, six-figure business owner. She, is helping so many people that are just burnt out, right? They may be multimillionaire, even billionaire, but they are still lacking something. They have a gaping hole. Their success from the outside is not fulfilling them, and she is helping them with that in a massive way. You're going to hear her lay out a number of things today. I loved some of the practical things that she says, even in the throughout the middle of the interview, but even at the end, she talks about a couple of things that her and her husband do that I've not even heard of before, and I thought it was a great idea for any marriage. Well, so many of us are working so hard and we're putting so much energy into our businesses, it can cost us a lot that we're not realizing. Our guest today is going to help us to think through that, figure out, what is it costing us and how should we be thinking about all this energy we're putting into a specific area of our lives, and maybe we're missing out on some other things that are more important. Christine, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Whitney.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation. The more I've gotten to know about Christine as I've done some research, I think she can help all of us in such a big way, because we all relate to this as we've pushed forward and growing a business, this empire, right? We all think we're pursuing in some way or a form or fashion. And so, Christine, let's jump right in. Tell us a little bit about who you are, maybe a little background, and then we'll dive into how you can help our listeners.
Yeah. So my name is Christine Jewell. We're so many things, are we? I'm an author, speaker. I recently put out a book called Drop the Armor, but I'm an executive coach, a high performance coach, and I work with a lot of C-suite executives, founders on creating more freedom and fulfillment in their life in every area, not just one area of the business, but really a upgraded approach to every single area of their life. And I do a lot of focus on relationships, because what I find is that usually by the time people get to me or reach out, they have amassed a lot of external success. They probably have a lot of toys. They've been chasing the American dream or whatever we want to call that. And there's still like a big gaping hole. Maybe their marriages are, disconnected, and they're going, wait, hold on a second. What are we doing this all for? Is it possible to have it all? Or do I have to always sacrifice something in order to get, something else? And so a lot of people come at this stage where they're just in this tension.
Yeah. You mentioned they've amassed a large amount of success, right? Quote, success, but they still have this big gaping hole. Speak to that. What is that? What do you see when you're working with someone that's like, well, it seems like they've got everything, but they obviously don't have something.
Yeah, on the outside, it's like, look, I got the cars, I got the Porsches. I don't know what it is, but a lot of Porsches and, these fast sports cars and men in their cars. But I don't just work with men, women too. Cars, boats, vacation homes, whatever, properties, businesses and that are doing 8, 9 figures. It doesn't really matter. I've seen it all. But recently, I was having a intake call with someone, and he said, on the outside, I'm a 10 out of 10 in terms of success. Like, I have everything most people work their lives for and strive for, but I'm at a 2 in terms of fulfillment. Like, I just don't feel fulfilled. I'm just still not happy. I'm still like pursuing all these things. And at the end of the day, it's like, I don't have this amazing marriage. And what is going on? The question of like, what is going on? I thought I was doing it right this whole time. It's like an emptiness, right? Inside. It's an unease, it's a spiritual unrest, it's a mental unrest. It's like an internal wrestling that we get to. And I believe all of us get to this place at some point in our life after decades of pursuing things. But I do believe and I know that we are created and designed to have it all if we do it in the right way, on the right foundation. And I think a lot of us have built things on divided, shaky foundations, right? One foot in, one foot out. And we get to the place that we feel like maybe we're straddling two worlds and we don't know which one to really press into.
Interesting. Divided, shaky foundations. We feel pretty firm for a while, right, on a good foundation, and all of a sudden, like you're talking about this guy that you're speaking to, who's got all the success on the outside, but even he can tell that, hey, there's something missing, and he's on a shaky foundation. Well, speak to that. How did you help him? What are some of the follow up questions? For the listener that's like, hey, that's me, Christine. Like I can really relate to that guy. What how where do I go from here?
Well, it's so interesting, because as you were talking, Whitney, I was like, when you think about what makes a really amazing day, like when you're like feeling high on life and you're like, man, I'm crushing it. I'm confident, I'm clear, I have certainty. What is the thing that happened in your life today? Or what was was it that you landed a big deal, you scored the right property, you got the funding? Is it that something came through? And like, but then the days that it doesn't, all of a sudden you're just like, I feel like crap. I don't know who I am, right? Or maybe you go through a season of that. And whenever there's these external things that are always having to happen to us in order for us to feel like significant, successful, confident, grounded, like we are winning at life, if it's always an external thing, I mean, it's going to be like the wind blowing, right? Like one day you're on a mountain, you're in this victorious pose, you're like, your chest is open, you're crushing it. But then the next day, it's like somebody just knocked you right out. And it's like, is our value that fleeting? Is our self worth, the way that we see ourselves, that volatile? It's like a puff of a puff of wind, here today, gone tomorrow. And I've just seen so many people go through massive shifts, career shifts, relationship shifts, market shifts, economy shifts. I mean, we've seen this over and over again in real estate, finance. I mean, it doesn't matter really what industry. And it's like, who are you? What defines you? And who are you when everything else is stripped away? Right. So actually, I want to just tap into this because I wrote this down. I might be jumping ahead, but it's like, where does your sense of self-worth, confidence, certainty, like that knowing, right? That knowing that's like in your bones, like that you just know that you can trust maybe your decisions, the road ahead, the plans before you. Like where does that come from? What is the source of that for you? And I think it's a really hard question to ask ourselves. It's one that most of us avoid because we don't like the answer.
Or how do you help somebody to work through answering that? Because that's what you just said. Most don't want to answer that question. They don't want to spend the time to like stop and think about that, right?
Well, that's the first piece of work that we do is really around identity. I mean, obviously the first stage is always like, well, what do you want? Whitney, what do you want? Like if what is the dream, right? For your marriage, for your business, for your spiritual walk as a parent. Talk to me about the dream. But like we always want to know, like, what is somebody longing for, desire? And then it's like, okay, well, who is that man? What is that? What do you want all that for? First of all, right? So that what? Like just so that you can be happy, just so that you can feel amazing, so you can feel successful. Like, what do you actually want it for? Because we know this, we were having this conversation before. God's always trying to get something to us so he can get it through us into other people. So we experience the blessings, maybe the financial increase, we get to enjoy property with our family. We have opportunity to invite people over, bless other people. But really, it's so that then we can be a conduit of change, of growth in our communities and everything else. So, what do you want it all for? And like the other question is, how do you see yourself? How do you want to see yourself? And as we're talking about real estate, we're talking about investments. One of the upgrades that I see really shifting is a lot of people wanting to go, like making the decision to go, well, I just want to feel successful. I want to feel accomplished to really, I'm living my purpose. I'm living out on purpose, my purpose every day, and I'm stewarding what God gave me. I'm a multiplier. And I think it's relevant to talk to the multipliers here because if people are investing, I think a lot of us, a lot of the listeners here probably see themselves as multipliers, or, we hear that all the time. But a multiplier is a steward. To steward something is to multiply it from the right place for the right reason. So that not only do we increase, but we actually create shift and change around us for the better, right?
I think we're stewarding more than just our dollars, right? I think oftentimes we think of stewarding something well, we think of our finances, but I think oftentimes we're not thinking about our time. And then something that even came up recently in our business is, my business partner and I are, we want to honor the Lord with all the living rooms that we manage. It just kind of hit us one day. It's like, wait a minute, we are managing, 1,600, almost 2,000 living rooms. Like where families do life, and so it's like, how can we steward those well, right? And so we're in a process now of trying to figure out how we can do that well. And so anyway, I love that thought of like stewarding all these aspects of your life, and the Lord has put these 1,600 living rooms in our care, right? And so I wanna make sure we're stewarding them well. But that's just an example that I thought.
Yeah, and it's so true. You said it's yes, it's financial, but it's time, it's energy, it's your gifts, right? It's your creative ideas that he gives you, it's your words that are coming out of your mouth, it's everywhere that you walk. It's first and foremost relationships. I believe that we are given, even if we go back to the garden, the original story is like, okay, Adam was there, right? He was given the land to steward, he was given work to do. Notice man was given work and purpose before he was given the woman, right? But then he got the woman, and it's like, okay, now you two are here to multiply and prosper, multiply each other, build each other up, work together. It's not one plus one is two. One can put, 1,000 to flight, two can put 10,000 to flight. We're multiplying each other. And I think that whenever people have like friction or resistance, or there's something like the brakes are going, things are not working, things are getting hard. One of the things I always say is like, how are we doing in the relationship arena? Like, really, what I've noticed, and I don't know if this is true for you, is that there's some lines in the relationships that are broken. Maybe it's their relationship with God, with their internal relationship. I mean, God is a God of order. He wants you to be in right relationship with him first. He is the ultimate source. He owns everything under the sun, including everything that will ever come into your hands. So it's like, how you doing with the owner of all the things, right? We want to be in right relationship. We want our
That's
heart
right.
in the right place to be seeking wisdom. We need to have right relationship with ourselves, not to always be dancing and performing for attention and, you know, what we need to be chasing outside of us. But do we know who we are? Do we know what we're being called to do? Like, do we know ourselves as sons and daughters and stewards? And are we in right relationship with, I believe the marriage is super important as a foundational relationship. If you guys want to build successful businesses, I just want to say that. I want to go on record for that. Is like, if you are praying for your business to be growing and your investments to be multiplying and you want peace and fulfillment and your marriage is out of order, it's like trying to drive with the brakes on and you're going on the wrong exit.
Yes, I could not agree more with that statement. I often speak, Christine, about my wife couldn't care less about real estate, but she has been my best counselor. I'll talk, or we'll talk about things early in the morning and pray together, or we'll be reading. I'll just bring something up, or talking about this potential partnership, and there's been so many times she's like, I just don't feel good about that. I
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
or what about this? I'm like, oh, I didn't think about that. And she didn't have to be some real estate expert, but no, she's my helpmate, right? I mean, she is.
Yeah.
So,
And she's a discernment, right? She's there to help you discern and wisdom. It's funny because in the books of Proverbs, wisdom is personified as a woman. Not that men don't have wisdom, but I see that it's a beautiful gift a lot of times that the feminine can breathe life and insight and wisdom and discernment. We're much, very tuned in. And again, it's irrelevant what's happening, what industry it is, because it's a discernment beyond just the physical things, right? It's the ability to see beyond the surface level stuff. And that person's not all emotionally tied up in the deal and is not having all these, all this history with it. So we're there and it's so key. And so I think that that marriage relationship is so key for us truly building the foundation that we can start to structure a great business, a great team around us, and obviously the people that our children, our teams, like, right? Like I always say, even when in my coaching circles, I say, a king is there for his people, like a godly king, right? A servant king. It's like we're there for the people to pour into them, to build them up, to multiply them. And when we serve from that way, people multiply and they flourish and the kingdom grows. We've all been entrusted with our own little kingdom, right? That's our business, our thing. But a tyrant king thinks his people are all there for him. Right? It's like, "You're all here to serve me, like, I need you to work for me," and I mean, we all get in this pattern sometimes where we get our head down and we're going after these goals and we are, maybe it's a season of just go, it's a sprint, and sometimes we forget to look up, and, I mean, I just had this very recently, like, wow, I have not been very good with appreciating the people in my life lately, like, slowing down and pouring some life, some seeds of life into these people, some encouragement, speaking and building them up.
Christine, I know you and I talked about this a little bit beforehand, but speak to, when you made the decision to integrate faith into your business. And then maybe speaking towards the listener who's like, yeah, I love the Lord, but man, should I be talking about my faith in my business? Should I be? What does this look like?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I would say in some way, shape, or form, I've been in church or, I loved Jesus since I was younger. I went to youth group, I went to church. Heck, I even ran a Bible study, and I've been divorced and remarried, but in my first marriage, and it was like we were doing all the things that we thought we were supposed to. We were going, checking all the boxes and volunteering but I did not have a real relationship. Like I didn't know God. I didn't know the heart, the character. I wasn't in conversation with the Holy Spirit all the time. I was not walking in tandem. I was doing this over here. And it was like, okay, that's great. I've done that. Check the box. I feel good on a Sunday. I did my duty. Then I would go off and then I would operate everything else in my life according to the world system, right? We were operating finances according to the world system. We were growing businesses at that time. Our first business, we had our CRM solution, marketing software that we were building out. We had a team overseas, 40 people overseas, teams here. The company grew rapidly, but it grew with stress. It grew with strife. It grew with anxiety. There was like constantly, it was a grind, and then after that, I did it again. It was another business for another 10 years after I got divorced because, we had built a glass house on sand, right? We had built a big house, a big business, doing great on the outward. But internally, like our marriage was not solid. Our faith was not solid. We did not have the infrastructure. After I got divorced, I did it again. I'm like, I know how to build a business. I'll do it again the world's way, right? And I did it again, and it was profitable every year. We grew every year, but it was stressful. I was waking up with anxiety. I was going to bed with anxiety. I bought commercial property, and I remember the day I bought like a commercial building, waking up in the middle of the night, and I was like, hyperventilating because I had this dream. At the time, I owned a studio, a fitness studio. We had hundreds of clients on monthly membership. And right after we bought the real estate property, of course, and I'm paying hundreds of thousands of dollars about to build this thing out now, just on top of the construction loans and the mortgage and everything. I have a dream that everybody cancels. Everybody cancels their membership. All of a sudden, nobody wants to work with us anymore. We have no cash flow. And I woke up like, oh my gosh, thank God. But that was kind of the edge that I was living in for so long. There was this like current, of just fear and anxiousness of, I'm carrying all of this. I have to figure this all out. I have to do it all myself. And I was very much operating as I was the source of everything, right? Or the clients or the source of everything, and just really heavy, really anxious. And so hit a point after about doing 10 years of that where I really was, I would talk about this in the book, perfect storm, burnout, burn down. I was just face down on the floor. My body was exhausted. I was a world-class triathlete. I was training like 25 hours a week, competing at world championships, trying to run a business. I've been a single mom and everything in my life was a push. Even the name of my business was called Push. I literally called my business Push. Second place is first loser. And I just was like, I'm so tired, God. I'm so tired of pushing and forcing and everything in my life. Always like, if I don't show up, I'm terrified this whole thing's going to fall apart. And it was really a moment of me just saying, like, I'm done. I never, like, effective immediately, I refuse to have a life of stress and chaos and anxiety. Like, I don't care what it looks like, but I know it's not going to be that. And that was really the beginning of him starting to restructure everything in my life, starting with the business model, how we were doing things, the messaging. And, fast forward, here we are today. My husband and I are remarried. We are merging our businesses. We are like, God, we are not doing this without you. Like, right. We are praying. He is the owner of the business. Everything we're like, we're not going to do this alone. And if we catch ourselves trying to go that route, we're like, okay, pull back. If we have to pump the brakes, we need to pause for a minute. We need to say no to a client. We need to say no to a deal. It's okay because we want to be in the right relationship, with each other, with God, with our partnerships, with our clients, with deals that we say yes to. And we just believe that if we build it on solid foundation and we do it with right relationship as the core, we can't lose. And by the way, if you study the book of success, the Bible, the Constitution of Heaven, you know that it's all rigged. Like that's the story. God loves to write that story over and over again.
No, I appreciate you elaborating because our only solid foundation is the Lord. That's for sure. No doubt about it. And I love how you say, "Hey, the book of success is already written, and you just need to read ahead a little bit."
I just drove, I went up to Toronto because my daughter is 21 and she's moving out for the first time and getting her own place. And she does a lot of brand stuff in Toronto. She wants to be in the city, in a high rise. And I said, okay, we're going to go up there, but I said, I'm going to help you get settled, but you need to be operating kingdom finances. So we went out for dinner, taught her how to do her spreadsheets and everything. And I just was like, you've got to build this thing on a solid foundation, this new business model going forward. And I said, look, your spiritual father has already left you a great journal. If you look at the Bible as it's a journal, your spiritual father put all of his thoughts, all of his wisdom, all of his business success and tips in there. So anytime you're struggling and you don't know what to do, just open the book, and if you look at it as a journal, I told her this because she's 21. Like, if I left you a journal, would you read it? She's like, yeah, yeah. And I'm like, okay, so pick it up that way, right? Like, read it with your heart. And there's so much gold in there.
I like thinking about it like that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, the creator of the universe left you a journal.
His journal of his thoughts, his ways, his advice, his wisdom, his warnings.
It's true stories, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Christine, you talk often about leaders drop the walls of their protective armor around their hearts, right? Or helping them to do that. What does that mean? Give us a little insight there.
Yeah. The name of the book is called Drop the Armor. And I wanted to call it Fight Different. But the publisher said, no, nobody's going to buy that book because nobody wants to fight. I'm not sure about that because I think a lot of people are just born fighters. They're born warriors. And I would raise my hand and say, I feel like since the beginning, I was always a warrior. I love to just have a challenge. I always wanted to have something to overcome. And that was instilled with my family of origin. But what happens is after years of whatever, we all go through things, broken heart. We had addiction in our family. We had a lot of just, I was trained from early on that if I was performing, if I was scoring goals, if I was getting grades, if I was making money, then that equated to attention and affection and love. And I saw that that was my father's model of the world, which ended up destroying him because he became, in the claws of addiction. But the armor is basically these layers and layers and layers of false identity that we pick up. That if I just do more, if I just get, if I just work harder, if I just get one more deal, if I just get a little bit more cash in my account, if I buy the thing, then I'll be worthy. The armor is all the years of the times that we failed and, we messed up and the stories we layer on, like, oh, you're a failure. You're never going to amount to anything. You don't know what you're doing. It's the wounds of our past. It's the false identity. It's the distorted programs. It is the weight of the world that we just stack and it stacks and it stacks. And we get to a place where we're operating from this wounded state, weighed down all the time. We're always either trying to avoid the pain of our past,
Yeah.
or we're desperately trying to like attack these beasts in this challenge. And I got to overcome this. And we're doing this from this distorted identity that's really weighed down. And so, one of the things that I work my clients through and the work that I do is really identifying like, what is all this stuff, mental stuff, physical stuff, relational stuff, spiritual stuff that is honestly, it's slowing you down. It's weighing you down. And what if we could just start to drop that, get rid of it, pack light, take what's essential, let God provide the rest, right? Like, and that is my message. Like every day, we've got to learn how to drop the stuff that we consciously or unconsciously picked up along the way from yesterday's meeting or what our dad said to us when we were 5 or someone else is crushing it and you are not where you want to be and now you're in this comparison and it starts to get discouraging and heavy and so it's every day developing practice of releasing the weight and then moving forward from a place of lightness, mentally light with a lot of bandwidth, spiritually light, emotionally light, physically light, like not a bunch of stuff, not a bunch of complexity in our lives. We love to make things complicated.
We feel like we're doing something then, right?
Yeah, it's like the brain loves to solve problems and it loves to create complex things. And so we have to become masters of every day clarifying what are we actually doing? What's the simplest way? Where am I just adding complexity to this? And what does it look like for me to move forward light? Because then you're agile. You can adapt, you can adjust, you can execute, you can realign yourself when God's like, or your wife says, I don't know, maybe like just pay attention to that, slow down, step back, right? We're not so weighed down with all this stuff that we're terrified of losing.
Speak to maybe just some practical steps on dropping those things, like you were talking that are weighing you down. Like you're talking, your dad. You mentioned your dad said that thing when you were 5 years old, and it just still is there, right, or whatever it may be.
I'll do two real quick. Two, one that is a personal, and one is a one that is relatable to like a client's, but I think a lot of people deal with this. I talk about this in the book, but when I was 5, my father was a high performer. He was super successful, was top of his game, had been in the government CIA for years, then was always just, you know, top of his game after that. But he also was, like I said, in the claws of addiction. And I went through a season where I saw him as a young girl try to commit suicide. And the ambulance come and I was so, I was 5 years old. The ambulance is taking my dad away. I had seen him kind of like collapse in the chair. And in that moment, there was a part of me that was like, I'm alone. I'm going to be alone forever. Like, I have to take care of myself. I have to be my own protector. I have to be my own provider. And it became a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy because later, that wasn't the first time, but there was a couple instances after that. When I was 17, we lost our primary home and my dad lost his job and ended up homeless overnight. So again, the story was reinforced. And so this persona, this identity of like, if it's going to be, it's up to me. Like, I have to do this myself. It was so strong. It was a stronghold in my life. It was just like the armor was so thick. And it really also prevented me from building really epic relationships because I would let people get close, even in business, even like in intimate relationships. It's like I'd let you get a little close, but I never could trust anyone. I wanted to pour into people, but there was always this like block, that wouldn't allow me. And so that was an example of just, I had to do some work to unravel that story, to rewrite that mental program that says, you know what, I'm actually created for partnership. I'm created for collaboration. I can go so much further. And it sounds good in theory. We're like, yes, of course we know we can go further together. But man, it's hard when you got those stories and you got all that past weighing you down. And another example would be, I see this a lot, especially with the clients I work with, where they are so weighed down by the opinions of others. It is crazy. They're fat in their staff. They're fat in like expenses because they have the wrong people on the bus, because somehow they feel obligated that they need to keep all these people around them. They don't want to let people down, right? They've got departments. They're saying yes to things. And it's like, it's so not only emotionally heavy because they're so terrified of disappointing or letting people down or looking like a failure. It's also a massive cash leak, a financial leak, because, right, they're again operating from this place of like just so much weight of their identity being rooted in what other people are going to think.
Yeah. Well, if we just thought about that a little bit, all the areas we are concerned about what other people think. It reminds me of the book. This is a great book, by the way, if you haven't heard of it. But Who Moved My Cheese?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What would you do if you were not afraid? I mean, it's one of the quotes that they write on the wall, and there's a children's version of that book that my kids love, and anyway, we read it often, even from when they're really little. And so, but just those quotes like that. What would you do if you were not afraid? And or ultimately caring about what other people think. All right, we're getting low on time, but I want to ask you too some maybe things people can do on a daily basis when they're trying to create the true freedom, fulfillment, some of those things they need to be thinking about because it's the consistent actions, right? It's not just like, oh, I'll have that 20 years from now.
No, you're absolutely right. It happens over time, right? This is it. We want to snap our fingers. We want the success tomorrow, but we are the sum of what we do every single day. That's not our identity, but that's what we experience. And so this is great news because we can start with what's in our hands today. And I'm going to just start with that first top of the day. I think it's so important at the top of the day. It's so tempting to wake up, pick up your phone, think about what you need to do. You've been hijacked by other people's agendas. You've been hijacked by propaganda. You've been hijacked by distractions. And so if you really want to move forward and truly not like, yes, and fulfillment, but move forward in the plans that God has for you, which to me is like the right path, right? Prosperity means you will prosper means your journey will go well. It's not going to be stressful and anxious. And it doesn't mean that there won't be pressure. There'll like be favor, there'll be blessing, there'll be doors opening. Like there's just a different way forward. So, first, I always say connect before you consume or create anything. Connect. Top of the day, quiet. Take a moment to really connect to your heart, connect to the Holy Spirit. We have this thing of just, Lord, what would you have of me today? God, what is the focus? What's authorized work that you have for me today? Maybe He's telling you to say something to your wife or call this person or focus on something else or say no to something. And for me, like that time, either right in the bed or right when I get out, it's like, Lord, what is the authorized work? My assignment direct from heaven. I'm meeting with the owner. He's giving me the first orders. And then before I start getting engaged, the other thing is to really get clear every day. What is the main thing? What are we really consciously creating here? Because we can get so caught up with these distractions and another shiny object and another opportunity. And all of a sudden, you're saying yes to all these projects and you lost sight of the main thing. So I think making sure that you go back to your North Star every day to go, like, what is that North Star? What are we building? What is in alignment with that? And everything else is a no. I would say the no is the last thing is that really we have to be really good at saying no, no. Like practice the art of saying no when your hand goes to pick up that phone. No, not right now, right? Or like no, because every time I say no, I'm saying yes to the immediate, the authorized work at hand, the focus at hand, the relationship at hand. And going back to relationships are wealth. When we invest in relationships, I mean, relationships are what open doors, right? To opportunities. Your phone, your contacts, the relationships you've built are so key when we think, I don't have resources, I don't have this. That book, Who Not How, right?
Yes.
I love it. It's so good. I've
Dan
read it
Sullivan,
so many
Benjamin
times. I went
Hardy.
to hear
Yeah.
him so good. I went to hear him speak. But it's like so often we think, I don't have the means, but there's someone, God loves to give us things through people and through relationships. And I think sometimes we can get so focused on all these distractions and transactions that we forget to slow down, connect to the owner of all things first, ask him, what is the authorized work for today? What's the focus? Get really clear on what's the main thing, eliminate other distractions, and then pour into relationships every day. And it can be so simple. I talk about this like my husband sends me a daily brief every morning. It's like an email every morning at the top of the day. And it's so awesome because it's like, here's what's happening in our life logistically. There's usually a word of encouragement, there's a prayer for both of us. It's like he's speaking life into me, he's clarifying communication, he's praying over us. And it's just such a great a connector. It's like that glue every morning, and it's an email, right? But it does so much for our marriage and our unity, and it's a simple thing, but it's consistent. It's every day. He doesn't do it on Saturdays and Sundays because we're usually together, but every day, Monday through Friday, I get the daily brief, and I love it.
That's incredible. I've never heard of that before. I may steal that. That is a really good
Do it.
idea. Wow. Well, speaking of that, Christine, and this I think will relate to what you were just talking about, but I always love hearing, what high performers do in the morning, right? Tell us about your morning routine or maybe even daily habits that you are disciplined about that have produced a high return for you.
Well, I am ruthless about these things. And I believe that a warrior of the heart, that's what I talk to. You want to be a warrior of the heart. David was a man after God's heart. He had the heart of a warrior, not a warrior of the world that's out there reactive, getting hijacked, getting chasing every shiny object, but a warrior of the heart. Wake up, Holy Spirit, what would you have of me? What is my authorized work? That is without fail every day. My quiet time. I'm a journaler. I just am. I write my prayers out. I do listening prayer every day. So for me, I just put some music on and I just write like free flow, like I'm in a conversation. If I have any questions about the business, about finances, about parenting, I'm just like in this two-way conversation, And sometimes it's a minute, sometimes it's an hour. I don't have like a tight time frame. I'm a big believer. I've been an athlete for many decades of my life. We need to activate our body. Our body is our vessel. It is the temple of the Holy Spirit. We need clarity. We need focus. So we need to do something to infuse our brain with oxygen every morning. We have an awesome gym in the garage. So, do a short workout. You know, I do some sort of activation at the top of the day. And I want to say that one of the things that has really changed the game for me in terms of how I structure my day is focused blocks, not just time blocks, but focus days. Right. So today we have 4 podcast interviews. Today is interview day, right? Everything that I'm doing today has to do with connection around podcasts, interviews, getting interviewed. We have a team development day. Everything on that day is team. We have creation days. We have, finance days. When you chunk things like that, you really optimize your bandwidth. And so many people think they need more time, they need more money, they need more people. What you need is to manage and optimize your days better, your focus better. And so there's so much science around that when we context switch and we're doing this and then we're doing that, it's like you're all over the place. You're leaking energy. And so for me, that has been a game changer is doing focus or theme days and breaking them down into performance days, recovery days, right? And practice days and performance days would be like today. Today's a performance day. 4 interviews is not nothing, right? We got to be on. Practice days are where you're setting yourself up. Yeah. Systems, processes, meetings, right? And then there's recovery days where maybe the work is lighter and we're still in it, but you're breathing, you're catching your breath, right? So those are some things. And I just want to say this last thing. We do an end of day recalibration every day. My husband and I are very serious about our time together. Quality time is my love language. So every day, around 5 o'clock or after dinner, we do a 3-mile walk together and we walk the loop. We have a loop around our neighborhood. And it's just an opportunity for us to download our days, to connect, to keep the energy clean if there's things that build up, right? And sometimes we start that walk and we're both a little bit like, oh, there's been a lot going on. And it just allows us to sync up and harmonize ourselves to each other. And so that also has been a game changer for not only our marriage, our communication, but for the energy we bring and the atmosphere we have in our home. So a lot of people are just going all day long and then they just jump at home and it's like kids are going in sports and like the atmosphere is chaotic. And we were just really clear, like we want to have a grounded atmosphere in our home. So we need to go and transition from work mode and performance mode into what the evening gets to feel like that we want to create.
Love that. I'm so glad you brought that up, even about the walk in the afternoon and that time together and recalibrate and download and all those things together. That's such a good piece of advice, I think, for any marriage. Anybody that's married that's listening.
Oh, walk and talks will save a lot of problems.
Yes, yes, but even right before that, you were talking about time blocking and having dedicated space, focused time blocking, right? And I feel like I've been trying to do this for years, right? I'm always looking at my calendar, like how can I be more efficient? How can I put more
Yeah.
things together? Working with my assistant to almost be ruthless at saying no,
Yeah.
to things that just
Yeah.
don't fit, where I need it to fit. Because one example I've run into recently is like I need a certain kind of energy for a podcast interview, right? But talking to investors all day is a little different, right? Than talking on podcasts and or talking to our team members, having team meetings all day. It's different. And so it's very helpful mentally for me as well to, man, okay, I've got half a day here where I'm focused on this one thing or type of thing. So I think that's so helpful as well.
It's so simple, but it's so that we don't do it, but it's so effective. There's a great book called Spark. Have you heard of it? It's about the neuroscience of, performance. And anyways, there was a whole bunch of studies done on high school kids that had to take these really intense science classes, math classes, and the grades were just all over the place, right? The scores were all over the place. Their focus was all over the place. So they did a study. And again, there's many, many studies around this. There's so much evidence, but they did studies where they put an intensive phys ed class, like a spin class, right at the top of the day, first period. And then immediately afterwards, it was the high intense, like mental athletics. Let's consider it mental athletics, right? The high demand things. Scores went through the roof. Performance went through the roof. Focus through the roof. All by what? Reorganizing what subject they were having first and then the other test subject. So they actually ended up implementing it into a couple high schools and rolling it out. And it was called the Spark program, where they would put these, like hit kind of workouts at the top of the day. And it is a strategy to multiply your time and your creative energy. So again, when someone comes to me and they're like, I just don't have time to do this creative work. I don't have time, to do this. I'm like, you don't have the right flow and the right structure to actually optimize the energy you do have. So that's why I call it an activation, because once my brain is on and I'm in that state, the creative ideas are flowing, the words are flowing, right? And so it's like putting your deep work, your mental athletics, like right after those. And this is something, again, when we talk about identity, I always tell people you need to look at yourself as a high performance mental athlete. You might not be playing the NBA, right? But high performance athletes, they are very intentional about their practice days, their recovery days, their performance days, their rituals. And we don't look at ourselves as high performance mental athletes, but that's what most of us are doing. We're not doing physical labor. Not a lot of us. We're thinking.
Some of the hardest work, right?
Yeah, that is like huge bandwidth demand. But we try to operate like a machine. And I always say, like, we were not created to be a production factory. We are not created to be just pumping things out 24/7. That is a machine. That's an industrial system. That's a factory system. That's the Pharaoh system. God's system is creation. We have flow, we have rhythms, right? We are creative beings. There's a process and a flow to creative output. How do we want to operate? Factory system, kingdom system, right? Like, I don't want to be a factory.
Me either. Christine, thank you, man, so much. One last question I always like to ask before we go is, how do you like to give back?
Well, I always, so many ways, like we're obviously involved in our communities. Um, right now we're getting involved with Hutch for Hunger, which is an organization that helps bring freezers actually and protein to food deserts. Because there's a lot of food deserts in our country and a lot of places where literally people can only go to the gas station or like a Dollarama or a dollar store. And that's where they're getting food for their families. And there's no access to high quality like protein. And so there's an organization, Hatch for Hunger, that, we've been partnering with. And it's amazing. Like, I think a $75,000 donation, which sounds like a lot, but just to give it perspective, delivers like 12 million dozen eggs to these food deserts. And, so just even getting a freezer out there in these locations allows them to have access to different foods. So in terms of organizations that are on our heart, that's one of them. My husband grew up on a farm and they were really poor. They had to barter for everything, right? They didn't have a lot of things. And even though they always had what they needed, just has a heart for to giving back to that. And also I just love to see people that are hungry, that are thirsty for knowledge, for wisdom. That's why I have the podcast too, Breaking Chains. It's free. Every week we go out there, we pour content and wisdom into people. And so I'm always excited to help coach, mentor people up at any stage.
Christine, pleasure to meet you. Honored to have you on the show. Thank you so much. Really, really grateful to meet you. I hope any of the listeners will reach out to you as well. And if they want to do so, how do they do that?
Yes. Well, you guys can connect with me over at thechristinejewell.com. That's my handle on Instagram and LinkedIn as well. But if you guys want to tune into the show, the Breaking Chains podcast, and I have released a book recently called Drop the Armor. I'm sure we're going to share the link with you. So you can drop that in the show notes. But that is just such an easy way to get into the work. It's also available on Audible. So no excuses for those of you that are like, I don't like books. Well, you're listening to this podcast. You like listening, Audible. Drop the Armor.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Pleasure to meet you.